Thank you, Kendra. We appreciate you always coming up with the right song for the right theme today. In the children's classic, Alice and Wonderland, Alice gets a little turned around. She doesn't really know where she is, and so she goes to see the Cheshire Cat. And she says to the cat, "Could you show me which road to take?" And the Cheshire Cat said, "Well, that entirely depends on where you want to go to." And she says, "Well, I don't much care." And the cat interrupts and says, "Well, then any road you take is fine." And then she adds, "Well, I do want to get somewhere eventually." And he says, "If you walk long enough, you will definitely get somewhere." We stand at the Church of Jesus Christ in a very difficult crossroads, a very difficult time. And we want to go the right way, but I'm not sure we know which way that is. We have specific questions to this congregation, but we have greater questions by the Church of Jesus Christ. How do we please you, God? Which way do we go? And the answer is, well, it depends on where you want to get to. Where is it that we are called to get to? And then we'll know the path. I had some interesting conversations this week with people about how they spent the 4th of July. And, you know, the normal questions, the normal answers came. Some went to family gatherings, some had cookouts, some watched TV specials, some saw some fireworks. But there was a commonality to almost every report that I got from people talking about how they spent Independence Day. There was a heaviness to their reply. A heaviness. Some even put it into words. I have to tell you, they said, I didn't feel there was a whole lot to celebrate this year. And I wondered, where did that depression come, that heaviness, that sort of pessimism? Where is it coming from? Maybe the high price of gas. I mean, we pass the gas station all the time and think, my gosh, this is not good. Or maybe it's the January 6th hearings and all the stuff that keeps coming out from that. Maybe that's got us down. Or maybe it's a virus that just won't ever completely go away. Or maybe it's a falling stock market. Or maybe it's this continual political vitriol where everybody hates everybody and nobody gets anything done. Maybe it's to see the president fist bump a human rights violator. Or maybe it's monkey pox. There's a feeling like we don't know where to go. There's a feeling like we've kind of lost our way. It's been going on for years, and we can't quite find the direction. And we seek counsel. Which path should we take? And the answer is, well, where do you want to get to? It's the same situation that the people of Israel faced in the time of Zechariah. As I said last week, Zechariah and Haggai, they preached in the same time, 520, 519 BC. And they were preaching to a people who had been decimated. They had been defeated and humiliated and slaughtered, and a remnant taken into exile into Babylon, where they lived for 70 years, separated from everything they knew. And then Cyrus became the king of Persia, and he sent the people home, 50,000 of them. He sent them back to Jerusalem. But when they got there, it was not the Jerusalem of their memories. You ever gone back home and found out, well, this street's much smaller than I remembered it, and this center of the town is not quite as exciting as I remember it. They went home to find even worse situations. The temple was in just rubble. Their homes were either occupied by somebody else or burned to the ground. There were no crops in the field that belonged to them. Their economic system was completely demolished. The temple, the economy, their personal lives, all obliterated. And they wondered, well, which way are we going to go? They had a strong feeling, like many Americans in this country feel, that their better days was in the past and weren't sure how they were going to go forward. Now, as I said, Haggai and Zechariah were, their message is very similar, and they preached at the same time in the same situation to the same people. But there was one big difference between Haggai and Zechariah. Haggai had to be at least 70 years old. He might have been close to 80 when he's preaching. Zechariah was in his 20s. You ever noticed a difference in perspective between somebody in their 80s and somebody in their 20s? Let me ask that again. You seem to have left me. Have you ever seen a difference in perspective between somebody in their 80s and somebody in their 20s? Oh, yeah, it's big. Old people like me, we always think our better days are back there. We always remember childhood with kind of a golden glow, and adolescence, carefree, and young adult. And that makes sense. We like to remember back in times when we felt better. Can we get an amen to that? Where every joint did not creak, and our vision was clear, and all of that. We like to think back about then. And other people were taking care of us, most of us as children. Somebody else had all the worries. We just played in the sprinkler in the yard, and that was about it. So we look back on those days as sort of a nostalgic golden glow, and we think if we could only get back there. So when Haggai preaches, he says we need to get back. Did you remember that? It was just last week. He says we got to get back to the worship of the living God as central to our lives. And if we do that, then God will respond. But if we keep the marketplace and money and wealth and power at the center of our lives as it is today, then things are going to continue to fall apart. Haggai says, how is this new way going for you now that you've replaced God with money and wealth and materialism? How's that going for you? And he says, well, obviously it's not going so well. Now, we as a nation know that we've done the same thing. We've replaced the worship of the living God with the marketplace, with making money, selling stuff, saving stuff, getting ahead, all that stuff, a lifestyle that we love and cling to and worship. We put all of that there instead of the worship of the living God. And Haggai said, we got to get back there. We got to get back there. And so, old folks, that's the way we look. We think we could get back there. But brothers and sisters, back there was not probably as wonderful as we remember it. Our brain plays a little trick with us, and it kind of embellishes and drops out the negative, and what we remember is the positive. And for certain, it wasn't always better for everybody back then. Can we get an amen to that? I often hear old men say, oh, I wish we'd get back where the women stayed home and worked in the house and raised the children, and that's the way God planned it. Well, talk to a lot of women. I'm not sure that was better for them. Where'd the women go? They lost, I lost. Where's that better? Okay, I don't know. You all left me in again. So, no, I don't think that was better. And for African Americans and people of color, it was not better. No, it was not better. So back there is not always better. Zechariah, being in his 20s, he doesn't necessarily want to go back. He wants to look to the future. That's the way young folk do. They don't have glory days. They don't have glory days, and their childhood doesn't seem that great yet. You ever talk to your children about 22? They're finally figuring out that you're the reason they're unhappy. And everything you've done poured them into a bad situation, and they bring it up. They got the courage to talk to you about it, and that's okay. That's part of the development of people as well. But they don't want to look back. They want to look to the future, and they idealize the future. Young people do. They see a future. If everybody could just think like me, if everybody had my values, if everybody understood what I understand. I've been to college. I've had some entry-level courses. If everybody was as bright as me, that future is going to be great. So Zechariah in his 20s, he's looking to the future, and he says it's going to be great. Great. To these people living in shambles, he says better days are ahead. He promises the people that he's preaching to, he says God's going to come for us. God's going to comfort us. God's going to help us flourish. The word in this text was prosperous. I don't like that word because we think of money always. He's not talking about money. He's talking about being happy, being gratified, having some joy in life. You're going to flourish again. You're going to be comforted by God. And you're going to be chosen by God and used to rebuild the beloved community. You're going to rebuild the temple and rebuild your homes. And the tape measure is going to go all over Jerusalem. We're going to rebuild the city under the guidance of God. There's better days ahead. But I want to make a distinction here. Zechariah's promise is not to a nation. It may read that way, but it's not. Zechariah was one of the first prophets to have a global view. He's not really promising a nation. He's promising that better days are ahead for the people of God. And he says, I used some foreign nations to discipline you, but then they took it too far. And he says, now I look out across, in the beginning of Zechariah, we have the 4 horsemen. We always like to talk about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. They go out through the world and they come back and say, everybody thinks everything's fine. But Zechariah says things are not fine around the world. They are not based on the worship of the living God. But when people are, Zechariah says God uses them. We read in the Old Testament that Nehemiah witnessed to Cyrus, and Cyrus, at least for a while, Persian king, came to the conclusion that the Almighty God was the one to worship and to live and obey, and that's why he sent the people home. And then we read about Darius. He was deeply touched by the witness of Shadrach, Meshach, you passed the Bible study test. Abednego. And he said, I guess the living God is the one to worship. And so there was a moment where Darius got on board. But then both men got very arrogant and very full of themselves, and they had to be brought low. Now Zechariah is saying to the people of God, better days are ahead, but not necessarily to the nation of Israel. Look it up. Look it up. They had a lot of rough times ahead of them. But to the people of God, who are they? Well, the most famous line from Zechariah is this one. God says, return to me and I will return to you. The people of God are those who come to God to worship the living God and to trust in that God. We sometimes use the phrase people of God in an arrogant fashion. Like we're better than anybody else. We're the people of God, more righteous, morally superior. I don't know that that's true. That's not really the meaning of the people of God. It's not to make us arrogant. Here's an illustration, what I'm trying to get to. Last week or the week before, we had a family reunion out in Colorado. 40 some of us gathered out there. And one night, somebody foolishly decided we should go out to eat. Now, you can imagine 40 people going into a restaurant. So we had to make some prearrangements. And we got it all set up, and there was a room for the second and third generation. And then our generation, the older ones, we sat at a table kind of joined to them. Then the problem came, how are you going to pay for this meal? And we didn't have any benefactors. I'll take care of it. No, not for 44 people. No, we weren't in that kind of money. And so they said, well, just give every table their own ticket. No, the manager said, we're not doing that. No, that's too many tickets. I'll tell you what, I'll make up 4 tickets, and that's it. 4. So my older brother was a genius. He came up with a plan. Every descendant of his would go on ticket number 1. Every descendant of my sisters would go on ticket number 2. My children and grandchildren would be given the number 3. And my younger brother and his children would be given the number 4. So when you made your order, you just said, put that on 1, or put that on 2, or put that on 3, put that on 4. And then at the end of the meal, they brought the tickets. Here's the number 1 ticket, here's the number 2, and then I got my ticket, number 3, and there was number 4. Somehow, I had 17 margaritas charged to my account. I'm not sure how that, no, that didn't happen. That's only because I kept circulating and saying, you're not a 3, you're a 2. Anyway, the point I'm trying to get to is the people that were on my ticket were Karen and my people. See, they were my people. I was providing for them. They were grateful to me. They said, thank you, Karen. Thank you, John. Thank you, Dad. Thank you, Grandpa. Everybody was grateful, and they even were nice to us for a while. It seemed like they wanted to please us for a little while because we just bought them dinner. My goodness, they ought to. And so they were our people. That's what it means to be the people of God, to believe that God has provided all I have in life, to be grateful to God for that provision, and then to try to live in a way pleasing to God for all the love God has showered upon us. That doesn't make us better. It makes us the people of God out of gratitude and humility. That's who we are. And Zechariah says there's a promise to those who return to God, live with gratitude and an obliging feeling towards God, try to live their life in harmony with God's ways. There's a beauty to that. And God has made promises to the people of God, that God will come to them, that God will help them flourish, that God will comfort them, that God will use them in the rebuilding of the beloved community. And that's the promise we need to hear today. Now, there's an elephant in the room when I talk about rebuilding, isn't there? Rebuilding our church. Isn't there an elephant in the room? Well, you ought to be thinking, hey, hotshot, you're going to be gone in 6 months. What right do you have to say we're going to rebuild? Well, I want you to think of it this way, if you could. I'm going to help you through phases A and B in rebuilding. We're going to start in earnest in September. We're going to give you the summer to kind of rest. And then in the fall, we're going to have to get busy rebuilding. And I'm going to be there with you through, let's say, phase A and B. I promise you, I'm going to work every day. I'm going to try to come up with the sermons of God every Sunday. I'm going to try to be there as your pastor, at least as well as I have been in the past. And I'm going to be there with you through phase A and B. Then you're going to get some fresh eyes. Praise God. Let's say that together. Praise God. Some fresh eyes of an interim time where people are going to come in and help you envision and get your values clear and inspire you in new ways. And they'll probably take you through phase C and D. And then you're going to call a new pastor. And I don't know whether he or she, I don't know anything about him. I have no idea who that's going to be. But I can guarantee you one thing about this new pastor. He or she will be younger than me. And you know what that means? They're not going to be talking about the glory days. They're not going to be talking about how if we get back to, they're going to see a glorious future. And they're going to move the church into a glorious future. And the people of God will be taken into better days. I promise you. I promise you. If I'm wrong about that, you call me back in 10 years and you can give me a lecture or something. I don't know. I promise you it's going to be that way. Not because of me, not because of anything else, but because of God being true to the people of God. I have to make one more distinction. These promises are not to the United States of America. They are not to any nation on earth. This congregation, when it's fully here, represents 30 nations around the world. This promise is not to any nation. It's to the people of God. I don't know what's going to happen in the United States of America, and neither do you. Neither do you. We could be on the precipice of an apocalypse. We really could be. Now, by apocalypse, I read a very interesting article by a guy named Peter Mommsen. And Peter Mommsen said, the title of the article was Hoping for Doomsday. I don't hope for doomsday, but let me tell you what he says. He says, in troubled times, we need the hope of the apocalypse, but he defines apocalypse not like the movies do or the television shows do or literature. He defines apocalypse as an event that unveils or reveals the way things really are. That's what apocalypse means. It's an unveiling or a revealing. And Mommsen says all through history, we've gone through periods of time around the world where events have happened and they've unveiled or revealed the way things are. We could be talking about an economic collapse or a war or a pandemic or an environmental disaster or a lot of different other things. Momsen says when those apocalypses come, they don't destroy the world. They don't bring life as we know it to an end. It's a period, an age that we go through. And in that shaking, the foundations of people are revealed. And if someone has based their life on money or military power or fame or material wealth or bigotry or any of these other things, that will be revealed in the apocalypse. Because it's not strong enough to carry you through. And there will be a faltering, a collapsing. But if your life is based on the worship of the living God, somehow you'll be seen through. That doesn't mean we won't suffer, but it means somehow God will see us through. And when the apocalypse has ended and the bad times have lifted, the people of God, the remnant of people of God will be there, and they will flourish, and they will help the beloved community rebuild into a new world where there is comfort and joy and justice and peace until the next apocalypse. So that an apocalypse is the very act of God to reveal to the world that they built their lives on a faulty foundation. And you got to have that before you get to the revival. Does that make any sense at all? People have to see what I base my life on just is not worthy. And sometimes those kind of big events shake us to the core and reveal that. That may be happening. I don't know. I'm not one that claims to know the future. But if it does, it does. It doesn't change where we're going. Where are we going? We're returning to God. That's where we're going. We've got to go back to God. You and me. We've got to go back to the full worship of the living God. And when we do, God will come to us. As we return to God, God will return to us. As all of you listening and worshiping through the week, when you return to God, God returns to us, and God comforts us, God encourages us, God helps us flourish, God has compassion, and God uses us to rebuild the church, rebuild the people of God by the love and power of God. Joel Clarkson wrote the little article, "At the end of the age, there is singing." I like that phrase. At the end of the age, there is singing. And he goes through history and shows one apocalyptic phase after another, go all the way back into the 1800s, one after another, and he shows what the people of God do in those times. They pray for certain, but they also just keep singing. Civil rights, they sang. Civil War, they sang. World War I, they sang. Remember Christmas Eve, that story where the French and the Germans stop and they all sing. They sing. The people of God just keep singing because they know that their faith is based in one who will never, ever let them down. In February of this year, when the Russian armies came into the Ukraine, and the Ukrainians were running for their lives as seemed to be wise, there was a group of believers, you can see it on YouTube, a group of believers that gathered in a subway station. And what'd they do? They sang of the glory of God and their trust in God. And when this apocalypse in Ukraine is over, the people of God will give witness to God seeing them through. Which way do we want to go? We want to go back to God. That's where we're going. And as we do, God will bless us. God will comfort us. And God will use us to rebuild the beloved community. And we will sing songs to the glory of God. Amen.